Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Secret Girl Gang podcast. Come on in, regardless of your gender persuasion. This will be a hopefully monthly podcast all about Eve, Riot Grrrls of Wrestling, and of course its surrounding community, which is such a huge part of it. I figured it might be nice just to pop up this little intro episode ahead of getting into the full-length reviews of shows. I did intend to review October's show, but alas, life is relentless, and so we march on. But with all that said, let's consider this the story so far, for both Eve and me, your host. We'll start with that one, shall we? So, hi. I am your friendly feral host responsible for steering this mad ship of a podcast. We'll see how well it goes. You can call me Bex or Phoenix if you know me via certain internet spaces. And I'm probably best known in the Eve community for being front row at most shows these days and being loud as all hell. So sorry if you've ever had to sit next to me. I am about 4 or 5 months into training as a wrestler myself. So you will no doubt hear me bring a little bit of that experience into this podcast along the way. Although, if anyone does ever see me wrestle in future and thinks that they recognise a spot or a sequence from an Eve match, no you don't, I definitely didn't steal it, I don't know what you're talking about. And of course, because I love to overload myself with tasks, I've also just begun pursuing my PhD in English Lit. Is it any wonder I immediately fell hard and fast for wrestling once I realised that it blended my two favourite things in the world: really interesting storytelling and absolute violence. The dream. So, with all that in mind, my intent with this podcast is to mix discussion of in-ring action and the matches with discussions of the storylines as they come up. Along the way, I'd also love to feature guests from throughout this sphere if anyone would ever like to join me to discuss pretty much anything of their choosing. I am as flexible as you'd like me to be. And also to talk a little bit about what I think makes Eve so very, very special. The energy of the community around it. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most pleasant experiences I've ever had attending a live show. And consistently so, every show has been wonderful. I really couldn't ask for a better place to experience live wrestling. Now, in terms of my history with Eve and with wrestling as a whole, I'm really new to the scene. I first started watching any kind of wrestling at all in February of 2025. Yep, this year. My first show was AEW's Grand Slam Australia, to the surprise of almost nobody if you've ever spoken to me for more than a minute. I was first drawn in by a Tony Storm promo. And realising that there is space for feral little queers like me, I stumbled arms open into AEW and haven't left since. A few months later, I was scrolling YouTube, hunting for yet more beautiful wrestling to delve into when I came across Eve. In particular, I came across Alex Windsor and Charlie Morgan's Loser Leaves Eve match. It was one that I watched with rapt attention and found myself crying at the end of, despite having never heard of either of these women before. Of course, I'm also a little freak for hardcore wrestling, so that aspect also appealed to me in a way that I found very, very intriguing. But, it was all over for me then. I went back through all the archives and watched as much of Eve as I could get my hands on. And then ended up attending my first ever Eve show in May for their 15th anniversary. Actually, it was the show that ended up being my first ever live wrestling show at all. Originally, my plan was to only attend shows sporadically and to keep up via the live streams, since, in case the accent didn't give it away, I'm from Scotland and still based up here. So every month, I ended up travelling down just to see the show. You know what they say about best laid plans. That first show was so good and the community was so welcoming that I couldn't help it. I've attended almost every show since then and finally decided to take the leap and hopefully fill this little niche of talking about it on the internet. I am evangelical about this promotion at this point, so anything that gets it in front of more people is a great thing to me. So, in the vein of Eve's own Get the Story videos that you can see ahead of every show that they do, welcome to this. Just a quick little summary of where we, as Eve faithful, are going into the November show, which is called Elite Encounters. At the time of recording this, we currently have 5 matches announced for the show. We have Lucy Sky versus Willow Nightingale making her Eve debut, which everyone was very excited about. We have Danny Moe also making her Eve debut versus Sapphire Reed. We have an 8-woman tag match featuring Lally, the Eve tag champions of Lana Austin and Holly Barlow, with Sky Smitson and Violet Knight versus Pretty Psycho, the other Eve tag champions of Amira Blair and Zoe Lucas. Don't worry, we're going to get into it in a minute. Along with Nina Samuels and Abby Cartwright. In a triple threat for the Eve International title, we have the reigning and defending champion Chris Statlander versus former international champion Anita Vaughn versus the longest reigning international champion, you. And then finally, for the Eve title, it'll be Nyla Rose, the current champion, versus Rio. So, let's get into what you might need to know. First up, the elephant in the room. The Eve Tag Championship controversy. This one goes back a little while, so let's strap in. At Eve 136, Mean Girls, back in July, the Big Beefy Bitches, the team of Emerson Jane and Rio, defeated Hard Up North, composed of Harley Hudson and Lucy Sky, to claim the Eve Tag Team Championship in a well-earned fight. Of course, there are always many hungry tag teams in this promotion, and all of them are eager to get their hands on the gold. It didn't take long for one of them to come knocking at the door, ready for their chance to win. Rio, the leader of the pack and the most dangerous woman in Europe, went toe-to-toe with Session Moth Martina in a grueling match lasting almost 15 minutes during Eve 137, Hit Me With Your Best Chop. Rio wins at the last possible second and, in the ring by herself, raises both tag belts high. Only for Pretty Psycho to make their wonderfully loud entrance, as they so often do. In the ring, they claimed that they had been scheduled for a match, and since Rio is a tag champ without her tag team partner, she should relinquish that title if she can't defend it. Dan comes along to confirm that, yes, they had in fact been scheduled to challenge for the tag titles, but given that Emerson Jane couldn't attend, the decision had been made to replace the tag match with Rio and Martina's incredible singles match and reschedule the tag team title challenge for another show. Not good enough. Pretty Psycho will not stand for such blatant disregard for the rules. Rio says she'll take them both on, and definitely not shrieking in abject terror, Zoe and Amira inform everyone that they play fair, and it would definitely be unfair to Rio if she didn't have a partner. No other reason, of course. There is, naturally, the option to give Rio a substitute partner. But unless it's Dan himself, Amira won't agree. We can't ask Dan to do it, of course. With no other recourse, Rio is forced to forfeit the tag championship. And Pretty Psycho, by virtue of, well, very little at all, are the new Eve tag champs. But not for long. Pretty Psycho did make a commitment to compete for those tag titles after all. And well, wouldn't you know it, there's a tag team match coming up that could just about become a triple threat. Pretty Psycho makes their first defence that night against Lally in Hard Up North. And well, what a glorious reign for Pretty Psycho it is. Zoe Lucas is pinned in 34 seconds, and so Lally and Hard Up North are left to battle it out. Lally emerged victorious and the new tag team champs. Or, well, not exactly if you believe Zoe and Amira. If you ask them, of course, any photo of Lally with the title is the heinous product of AI, and isn't that just a crying indictment of the world we live in now? At Eve 139, Strong Women style, Lally and Pretty Psycho meet in the ring again. Somehow, all carrying belts? Don't even worry about the fact that Pretty Psychos are smaller, of course. Lally come away with the win, yet again. Or well, not if you believe Zoe and Amira. No one can ever say they aren't incredibly self-confident or delusional. Eve Faithful, I leave that one up to you. As it stands, we'll see how it goes when they come face to face in the ring again. Pretty Psycho's actions, though, have consequences, for Rio more than anyone. The month after she loses her tag titles via forfeit, Rio is scheduled to take part in a singles match to determine the next number one contender for the Eve title. At Eve 138, Eve versus the World, Rio and Lucy Sky go head to head. It's a furious, frantic matchup, and it's pretty clear throughout that Rio is still holding a lot of anger at being slighted the previous month. Lucy Sky, incredible though she is, can't compete with a Rio this motivated and this vicious. And after 10 minutes, Rio picks up the win to become the number one contender for the Eve title. A title that, at the end of Eve 138, moves to the hands of Nyla Rose after her match with Nightshade. Nyla, in her Eve debut, becomes the new Eve champion. It's a moment that, for all intents and purposes, should have been a celebratory one, with all the roster coming to the ring to cheer and stomp for their new champion. Except, of course, the number one contender. As the crowds are giving Nyla a well-earned "you deserve this" chant, Rio appears in the ring and ambushes the new champ, beating her down until she's chased off by the rest of the roster. Nyla assures Rio that, if she wants to fight, all she has to do is ask. And that match might be set for this upcoming November show. But, not just satisfied with that, Rio continues to make her point. On social media, she makes it clear what she means when she tweets, "This is Pro Wrestling Eve. You AEW girls don't just get to just stroll in and try to take the top spots." But Rio's rage doesn't seem to be limited to the guest talent from AEW. At Eve 140, Global Women's Strike 4, Rio is set to fight the former Eve champion Nightshade. A fair, albeit intense match on paper. It all ends in tragedy 6 minutes in, when Rio hits Nightshade with a chair, a move so against the spirit of Eve that a disqualification bell is rung immediately. Not satisfied with that, Rio continues to beat Nightshade with the chair, ultimately putting her neck over the back of one chair and hitting her with another until the blood spurts from Nightshade's mouth. In the aftermath, Rio warns everyone online, "This is just the start. Pro Wrestling Eve owes me massively. You were collateral damage. Dan Reed, I'm not messing about. You owe me and you know it." Perhaps this is all spurred by the way she was forced to forfeit her tag titles. However, all we can do is wait and see if Nyla Rose can overcome Rio, or whether Rio's reign of terror has only just begun in Eve. But the Eve title is not the only one up for grabs at this upcoming show. The international title is on the line at Eve 141 Elite Encounters. Our current champion, and more recently, the AEW Women's World Champion, Chris Statlander, returns to defend once more. At Eve 136, Mean Girls, Chris Statlander defeated Anita Vaughn to become the international champion, only made possible by Anita's own challenge to Eve. Give me actual international talent to defend against. Well, be careful what you wish for, I suppose. AV makes it clear that she is not ashamed of her loss. She went toe-to-toe with one of AEW's best, and she doesn't think that losing is worth getting emotional over. Oh no. AV promises that when she returns, it'll be all violence. It's a promise she keeps. Until Chris Statlander returns. At Eve 139, Strong Women style, Chris defends against Nina Samuels. AV doesn't get a look in, and for that matter, neither does Sapphire Reed, the last woman to defeat Nina Samuels. It's not fair, really, is it? Of course, it's also true that both women haven't shored up wins recently, so it's set. Sapphire Reed versus Anita Vaughn that night. AV walks away with the win, and, finally ready to cash in her rematch, she's set to face Chris Statlander. Only there's a wrinkle in all of this. Yu, in her final match outside of Japan ahead of her retirement this year, returns to Eve in November. Yu, who still holds the record for the longest reign with the International Championship. Chris Statlander might find her focus split by her brand new World Championship over in AEW. AV might be too motivated to reclaim what she lost. Or maybe Yu is coming home for one more title before she hangs up the boots for good. Now, this last story isn't on the November card as of yet, but I wanted to talk about it anyway. So sue me, it's my podcast and I make the rules. One of the best stories in Eve this year has been the one that Session Moth Martina has been quietly telling, and one that came to a head at Eve 140 Global Women's Strike 4. So many of the best stories in wrestling come from a mix of worked and shoot content, and this is no different. For a long time, Session Moth Martina has been on a losing streak in Eve. She just can't seem to pick up a win, no matter how much she leaves it all in the ring. She's losing confidence in the ring, and frankly, in herself. It's hard to put yourself out there and to never ever seem to get that win. It's hard trying when things like this kick you down. At Eve 140, Martina comes out to explain this to us all. She just doesn't think she can do it anymore. And in a very candid way, she explains that her life has also changed. She's lost her dad, is caring for her mum, and finds that she's losing herself as well as her matches. It's not an easy lesson, but as ever in wrestling, it's something that feels honest to how we all experience life. Sometimes things are just shit. They really are. When Dan comes to the ring and tells Martina all of the terrible things that people have said, it has the crowd incensed on her behalf, even as she seems resigned to it. And yet, the people in that room, the people who matter, are behind her. It's a beautiful moment to watch everyone rally behind her. It's not enough for Martina. Not yet. Instead, Millie McKenzie comes to tell her some hard truths. Millie can't wrestle. Her health doesn't allow it anymore, and it might not allow her to wrestle for a long time. Just another one of those moments where life insists on keeping you down. But Martina can wrestle. More than that, Martina can wrestle for Millie. If she doesn't have the confidence in herself, she can do it for Millie. It's always easier to do things for the people you love. So, Martina agrees to wrestle. More than that, Martina steps in the ring to main event Eve 140. And after almost 20 minutes against the fearsome undead bride, Su Yung, Martina wins. She's bloody, she's covered in beer, she's been through a war zone. But finally, Session Moth Martina gets to stand in the ring and know that she can do it. No matter what else is going on, she's still capable of this. It's beautiful. It's fucking pro wrestling. So, if you want to come along for the ride, please do. Eve 141 Elite Encounters takes place on November 7th at the Big Penny Social in London. As of right now, when I'm recording this, standing tickets are still available. You can be in that room with us all. You'll see me there, loud, very Scottish, very feral, and with a carabiner full of friendship bracelets to welcome you all to the Riot Grrrl Club. Come and enjoy every last fucking moment, because you'll never be the same afterwards. Just one rule to remember if you do come along. Don't be a dick. Thanks for joining me in this little recap of the story so far, and hopefully I'll see you all again here after Elite Encounters. Bye.